So before we get started on this video, I just want to give you guys a quick update on my course. It's almost there now. I'm editing the last videos and going over the last topics right now. So in a few weeks, it will be out. And I'm gonna price it at $299. And you will have access to everything in there. It's all or nothing. And you'll also have access to the community. And I can't wait to meet you guys in the community and just hang out with you in there, and we can do this thing together where we help each other succeed with this thing. So look out for it. Maybe it's something to wish for Christmas, or maybe you just want to get it right away. But I can't wait to see what you guys will do with it. So now on to the video. There are so many metrics you can dig up and you can focus on when we're talking about display ads. So welcome to the world of 3 or 4 letter words. So first we have RPM, which is your revenue per 1,000 page views. And with Ezoic we have EMPV, which stands for how much you will earn per 1,000 visitors. And now with Adthrive we also have RPS, revenue per session. So it quickly gets very confusing, and it's quite important that you get these differences here, because it's not the same thing. It's not the same to track how much you're making per 1,000 page views as with 1,000 session or visitors to your site. So let me share with you which number I focus on and which metric I track across all my sites in order to make sure that I make the most of the data and I make as much money as I can and draw the right conclusions from the data. But before we dive into the number that I track the most, it's important to understand that you need to know exactly what you want to use this data for, because there's so many things you can track. You can track so many numbers within Google Analytics and within the premium ad networks. They all have their own big data analytics, and I just talked to Adthrive. They're totally ramping up on data analysis as well. We've seen this mostly with Ezoic. They have a huge data analytics tool where you can dig into a lot of different things, and seems like Adthrive is around to do the same thing. So I use this data to figure out which of my articles are killing it with ads and where do I make the most money across my articles. I also use it to figure out which new categories should I go into and which sub-niches within the niche should I try to get into and find some underserved topics. And finally, of course, I also use it to figure out what my next site should be, because sometimes I just stumble across something that's have a super high earnings with ads, and then of course I want to build an entire site in that direction. So the number I track the most across all my sites and all my articles is none of these numbers that we talked about in the intro of this video. I track the revenue per URL, meaning exactly how much money am I making per page or per article on my site. So that's a little different from looking at how much you're making per 1,000 page views, because we need to take the traffic into account and how much you're making per 1,000 page views, because some articles will have a lot of traffic but lower earning with ads, and these can be fantastic articles on your site, because remember, many times we will have the most traffic around beginners content. When you describe something well that all beginners within your niche are looking for, you will have a lot of traffic to that article. And many times we will see a little bit lower earnings with ads here, but since the traffic is so high, the earnings from that URL will be super high. And on the other side, you can have articles with a strong commercial intent, for example, best X for Y, or a review, or something that's very commercial, meaning that people are actually asking you for a list of products, for example. There we will have sky high earnings with ads per 1,000 page views, but the traffic is lower because the whole search result page in Google is just very messy. There's a lot of ads, there's a lot of snippets and stuff all over the place because Google wants to monetize these searches. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that there's a lot of competition there. So these are not always the ones where we make the most with ads, not because the RPMs is lower, that's typically very high, but because the traffic is lower. So when you sort of combine the two, when you look at how much traffic are you getting and how high are the earnings per 1,000 page views, we have this number, how much are you making with this URL in total. And luckily the ad networks show us this number. Let me show you how to find this number inside Adthrive and inside Ezoic. Those are the two ad networks that I use. Let's start with Ezoic here. Ezoic is the best ad network by far when it comes to data. They have this huge analytics tool built in that I absolutely love. And that's also one of the reasons why I really like Ezoic. So first here you go to landing pages. That's one way to look at it, and you will have your URLs over here in this column below my mouse here. And then you'll see the page views and how much revenue you are making per URL. You can also see this number here that Ezoic reports on called EMPV, which, like I told you, is the earning per 1,000 visitors, because that's how they like to calculate things. And it makes a lot of sense if you dig into why they do it, because it takes into account how many page views and additional pages people click onto on that visit to your site. So that makes a lot of sense. So here you can see that revenue number that I'm looking for, and you can see the EMPV next to it, and you can sort here either way. So you'll see the best at the top or the worst at the top. And another really cool feature here with Ezoic is that now I'm watching these numbers for one of my websites, but you can actually also switch here and see it across all your websites. So when you have a bigger portfolio of sites, this is really cool, because let's say you have 10 bigger sites or just a few bigger sites. In order to dig into these numbers, it's nice that you don't have to dig into each site and compare them side by side or pull it all into Excel or whatever to see where you're making the most money, because when you want to get into a new niche, you just want to know where you're making the most money, right? You don't care exactly which site you wrote that article on. So you just select all sites instead of a single site, and that's a very, very cool feature. So props to Ezoic for that. Now let's switch over to Adthrive and see the report they have. You go over here in the left column and you go to RPM per page. So first, in the first column here, we have the page URLs, then we have the page views and the earnings. Let me remove myself a little bit here. And they actually recently added quite a few new columns here, because they are definitely ramping up on this analytics here. I guess they're seeing what Ezoic is doing, and that's just pretty cool that we have more competition across the ad networks. So now we have the page views, the earnings, the RPM, the time on page, impression per page view, and we have the CPM. It's just a little confusing. I'm pretty sure it's how much you're making per ad on the site. So it doesn't make that big of a difference when you have the earnings per 1,000 page views, but I mean, maybe you can find a use case for it. Then we have the viewability. That's also pretty cool. That's just a number of how visible your ads are on the site. Let's say the ads are buried down in the sidebar and people are not really looking there, or maybe they're watching it on smaller screens so it doesn't appear. Stuff like that is taken into account here. So 50% of course, a lot lower than 70%. You can compare this to how much you're making per 1,000 page views in order to see if the ad setup on that specific page is bad. And then of course you can ask them to give you a different ad layout. And that can make a lot of sense if you have a few pages with a lot of traffic. On some of my sites, I have a few articles that will each get more than 20,000 page views per month. So that's almost a whole site in its own right. So it makes a lot of sense if the ad viewability is changed from 50 to 70, of course. That will make me much more money on a monthly basis. But let's just go back here to the earnings. You just sort it here like you would with Ezoic, and you'll quickly see which articles on your site are making you the most money. So pay attention to these numbers, and I'd say you should also pay a lot of attention to how much you're making per 1,000 page views, because sometimes we'll find some topics in there that will have some correlated informational or educational type searches, meaning that we can find some topics around articles or areas of your niche where there's just super high earnings with ads. So even though you have some articles on your site that's not making too much money, but you see they are making a lot from the little traffic they have. So if the earnings per 1,000 page view or the RPM is high, see if you can dig into that and just carve out more articles around that maybe will have more traffic. So you should definitely dive into those numbers as well. But my main number, again, I focus on is just the revenue per URL, because I mean, that's what matters, right? We just want to make as much money as possible per article. I hope this video was helpful. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'll see you guys soon.